Can you believe it? It is week 17. It is championship week. And listen, if you're just like me, I'm actually competing in several championships this week, trying to get this championship ring for those respective leagues. And in this video, we're going to be exclusively going over not only the players that you should be adding, but I'm also going to actually go over some streaming options that you need to consider for your defenses, so that way you can put yourself in the best position possible to win your championship matchup. Before we go over all those players to add, we're going to quickly highlight some of the great things that we saw this past week in week 16, and we got to first start off with some of these running backs that had huge performances. And we got to first start off with Jonathan Taylor, who put up 40 points in PPR formats. He actually ran 29 times for 218 yards, had 3 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor has been absolutely phenomenal, and it's all because of the volume. In his last 8 games, he's had 6 games with 20 plus touches, which led to the best game that he's had thus far this season in week 16, and it only gets better in week 17 when he faces the New York Giants, who are among the worst defenses when it comes to points allowed to opposing running backs. Chuba Hubbard for the Carolina Panthers showed out in a huge way. He put up 30 plus fantasy points in PPR formats, had 25 rushing attempts on 152 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been a top 12 running back in 5 of his last 7 games, truly capitalizing on the volume there with Carolina. And we got to also get up to Devon Achane, who also put up a good performance as well. He had 17 attempts for 120 yards. He was also an effective dual threat running back by also catching 6 receptions on 7 targets for 70 yards. Week 16 also saw some huge performances from some wide receivers, and none bigger than Justin Jefferson, who went up against the Seattle Seahawks and put up a huge performance, caught 10 receptions on 13 targets for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's now had 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games. This actually comes after having 6 straight weeks without 1 single touchdown. Next, we got to go over is Keenan Allen. He put up a huge performance versus the Detroit Lions. He caught 9 receptions on 13 targets for 141 yards and had a touchdown. He's now coming off back-to-back games with 13 targets, continues to be effective with that volume. And I can't mention enough, Brian Thomas Jr., one of my favorite players right now in the league. He had another huge performance versus the Las Vegas Raiders, had 9 receptions, 13 targets, 132 yards, and a touchdown. He's now had 4 straight games with double-digit targets, averaging 24.5 fantasy points in PPR formats. We got to round it out. Unfortunately for my beloved Philadelphia Eagles, Jaden Daniels put up a huge showing with 5 touchdowns, giving you 40 points in fantasy. This comes after Daniels had a very tough week in week 11 versus Philadelphia when he only gave you 15 points. He was able to turn it around, threw for 24 completions on 39 attempts for 258 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 81 rushing yards, ends the week as the QB1. Okay, now that we've gone over the players that showed out in week 16, before we go over the players you should be adding, do me a solid. Most of you are not already subscribed, so if you're getting value in this video thus far, do me a solid. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Let's go over the players you should be adding for championship week. And the first one I'm going to add is going to be Trey Benson from the Arizona Cardinals. He's been someone that I've been hammering over and over again that you should be adding, because he's currently still only rostered in 18.1% of ESPN leagues, and James Conner left early in week 16 after having a strong start to that game. He left early, and he could be at risk for missing week 17. The volume alone makes Trey Benson really valuable, and even if you feel like your roster is more than fine, I still highly encourage you to make sure that you at least add him, so that way you can play defense from having your opponent also adding him as well. Next is going to be Jalen McMillan. I mean, I don't get it. We've been telling you to roster him over and over again. He's only rostered in 33.1% of ESPN leagues. He had a good showing last week. 5 receptions on 7 targets, had a touchdown. He's also now given you 16.7 points in PPR formats. He's now had 4 touchdowns in 3 games. He also has averaged 19 points during this stretch where we've been telling you to add him. He's been a good add for this offense, and someone that I think will also be phenomenal as you go into week 17. Next we're going to target is going to be Alexander Mattison from the Las Vegas Raiders. In his second game back, he had 15 touches. He was able to give you 1 touchdown on the ground, also had 4 receptions on 7 targets, giving you 15.6 fantasy points in that matchup. He is going to be facing a New Orleans Saints defense in week 17 that has actually been a bottom 5 defense in points allowed to opposing running backs. Now, if you're a Jalen Hurts owner and you're a little bit worried about what's going to happen at the quarterback position for your week 17 matchups, I have 2 options for you that could help you out that are available in a good chunk of leagues. And the first one is going to be Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of the Indianapolis Colts. Since week 11, when he came coming back as a starter for the Colts. He's actually had 20 plus fantasy performances in 3 of his last 5 games, and he also has a very juicy matchup in week 17 when he faces the New York Giants. They've been a defense that has allowed the 8th most points to opposing quarterbacks, and his running alone makes him a really good solid option, considering that gives him a very strong 4 in fantasy. And the next quarterback you should be adding is going to be Caleb Williams, who's currently only rostered in 44% of ESPN leagues. He threw for over 300 yards versus the Detroit Lions and also had 2 touchdowns thrown. In his 4 of his last 5 games, he's actually thrown for multiple touchdowns. He's also facing a Seattle secondary that actually has allowed 9 passing touchdowns in the last 4 games. Okay, lastly, as a bonus, for those of you that play with defenses, I have 3 options that could help your season. Listen, for context, a few weeks back, I added the Atlanta Falcons because I knew they were playing the Giants, and that paid dividends because they gave me 26 points in last week's matchup to secure me my win. And this week, the Colts are playing that same team, and just like I mentioned, they're available in 27.6% of ESPN leagues, so they're out there for sure, and they're playing these same Giants that just gave up 26 points in fantasy to the Atlanta Falcons. And the next one you're going to want to target is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. I know it sounds a little bit weird because they're available in 4.1% of ESPN leagues, but they're playing the Saints. And if you saw this Monday Night Football last night, the matchup was not great. The Saints looked very terrible. This offense looked really flat, and I believe that Las Vegas could leverage that to have a really good performance for you in week 17. And lastly, we're going to be targeting is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. This team is currently rostered in 49.8% of ESPN leagues. The Buffalo Bills defense just got 12 points in fantasy versus the same New England offense, and I believe that the Chargers can do the same thing in week 17 for your fantasy rosters. Hey, you made it to the very end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Listen, do me a solid. If you got value on this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, check out some of these other videos that I have here on the channel. Best of luck to you in your championship rosters. Be sure to comment below how your teams are doing. Best of luck as you pursue your championship ring. Until next time, take care. God bless. Peace.